Hi, my name is Kevin McKnight, and this is my vulnerability assessment of my own server for the KSU class Cyber 4220. So during this presentation, we're going to go over the executive summary, the required services, the technical summary, the Linux operating system findings, the Windows HTTPS findings, the Linux SMTP findings, the Linux database findings, the Nmap scans of both the Linux and the Windows servers, and then the Linux firewall and app armor verifications. And then we will also go over the common vulnerabilities scoring system, or the CVSS, and then we're just going to hit the references. So this report is over the servers assigned to Kevin McKnight. It's based on the Greenbaum results over two separate scans. The Linux Ubuntu servers at the internal protocol or IP address of 192.168.5.169, and the Windows servers at the IP address 192.168.5.170. Generally, Mr. McKnight's servers is without any major or urgent vulnerability findings. However, he is missing two required services, based on the Nmap scans. Both the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol secured, which is SMTPS, and Postgres SQL. Ports are showing as closed when it should be showing as open on the Linux server. In order to maximize the security for his Linux server, Mr. McKnight will need to properly open the ports for the missing services and continue implementing hardening tactics across these ports. I recommend that Mr. McKnight prioritize optimizing the security of his email servers by getting SMTPS open and running properly. The database service Postgres SQL will also need to be optimized properly. For the Linux server, a low severity recommendation is that Mr. McKnight removes transmission control protocols TCP timestamps. The last moderate recommendation being made is for the Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secured HTTPS on Linux, where it is recommended that the secured socket layer and transport layer security SSL and TLS cipher suites are blocked from being accepted by HTTPS. And here's a list that specifies each port that's considered vulnerable based on the Greenbaum report and the required services for both of Mr. McKnight's Linux and Windows servers. So as you see here, you can see the TCP service SMTPS, which is port 587, the TCP service Postgres, which is port 5432, and the TCP service HTTPS, which is port 443. So here's the list of required services. For the most part, Mr. McKnight's Windows servers has everything that it needs. For Linux, you can see here that he is missing SMTPS and also Postgres. Okay, technical summary. Between both Mr. McKnight's Linux and Windows IP scans, the Greenbaum Security Manager returned two findings. One for both Windows and Linux. As far as severity goes, Mr. McKnight's vulnerability results shows one moderate finding for Windows and one Linux finding that is classified as low severity. For the Linux find, to prevent a security breach from an attacker, it is recommended to disable TCP timestamps. The less information available for grabs by an attacker, the less chance there will be for a security breach. For the Windows finding, Greenbaum is suggesting that all SSL and TLS cipher suites should be blocked as they are attack vectors on HTTPS services. Mr. McKnight will also need to configure the missing services SMTPS and Postgres SQL. Linux operating system findings. The Greenbaum report found that Mr. McKnight's Linux system shows TCP timestamps, which allows the uptime of the system to be calculated. Tant explains that attackers can calculate what the system's uptime, boot time, and the host clock down to the precise detail. With this information, an attacker can also find network-enabled operating systems or spoofed IPs that may have been hidden. So the criticality of this finding is considered low, and the recommended fixes or the recommendations and fixes in order to turn TCP timestamps off on a Linux server, the following command can be used, which is /etc/sysctl.conf. And this command will open a conf file where the following lines can be added. And I'm not going to read this out, this line here. And the user can also execute the following command to apply the setting at runtime, which is this sysctl-p line here. Windows HTTPS findings. The Greenbaum report found that all SSL and TLS cipher suites accepted by a service were attack vectors on HTTPS services. Ashcraft explains cipher sweeps, detailing that they are instructions that allow secure network connections through TLS. Under the hood, cipher sweeps provide algorithms and protocols that are required to secure communications between both the client and the servers. If an attacker is successful in brute forcing a weak cipher, then that data containing sensitive information will be completely compromised. The amount of damage an attacker can do is limited only to the value of the data and the attacker's imagination. So this finding is considered a medium when it comes to its criticality. It is recommended that all SSL and TLS ciphers be disabled. To do this, the user can run the following command in PowerShell, which is this git command here. This command will allow the user to pull all TLS ciphers suites on their server. Once the user has the list of cipher suites, they can run the following command to start disabling them, which is this disable command here. And then you put in the name of the actual cipher suite. And I have an example down here which shows what the actual command will look like as a whole. Linux SMTPS findings. So SMTPS is used to secure SMTP by adding transport layer security, which requires communication partners of that service to provide authentications. On Mr. McKnight's servers, this service is not listed as being configured. Because this is a required service, I listed the criticality as high. So to configure SMTPS on the Linux system, the user will need to install Postfix. Postfix is a mail transfer agent, or MTA, used for routing and delivering mail electronically. This service is also free and open sourced. To install Postfix, the following command can be used, and it's just a sudo apt install Postfix. Hostway states that once Postfix is installed, the following command can be ran to configure Postfix, which is this sudo dpkg-reconfigure Postfix. Once Postfix is up and running properly, the user can then authenticate SMTP by configuring the directives located at the main or in the main file, which is here, and it's just depends on where you actually labeled your file at. Linux database finding. PostgreSQL is an open source general purpose object relations database management system. On Mr. McKnight's server, this service is not listed as being configured. Because this is a required service, its criticality is listed as high. The user can run the following command in order to install PostgreSQL, the sudo apt install PostgreSQL. Once installed, the user can then run, the user then needs to access the configuration files, and this can be done through the following command here. And once you're in those configuration files, you can add your settings into there, which should allow it to be read by then. So here's a screenshot of the Nmap scan for the Linux server. And as you can see here, it is indeed missing Postgres SQL and SMTPS as being opened. Here's a screenshot of the Windows server, and the Windows server has everything that is required of it, so it is would be considered pretty secure. Here's a screenshot of the Linux firewall verification, and if you notice here, Postgres is showed as accepted on the firewall, but it's just not configured correctly, which is why it was not showing up in Nmap. Here's the Linux App Armor verification, and it is running and configured correctly. Common vulnerability scoring system. The Greenbone reports a scale is used to determine how critical the findings are and prioritizes them based on an established ranking system ranging from 0 to 10. Schlossner explains that the system used is called the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, the CVSS, which was developed for the assessment of vulnerabilities. Schlossner states that the CVSS score evaluates vulnerabilities according to various criteria, or the so-called metrics. So there's the base score metrics, the temporal score metrics, and the environmental score metrics. Base score metrics represents the basic characteristics of a vulnerability that are independent of time and the IT environment, which is how well can the vulnerability be exploited and what is the impact. Temporal score metrics represent characteristics that can be changed over time but are the same in different IT environments. For example, the deployment of a patch by the deploying organization would lower the score. And environmental score metrics represents the characteristics that apply to a specific IT environment. Relevant here are how well the affected organizations can intercept successful attacks and or what status a practical vulnerable system has within the IT infrastructure. And here are my references. Thank you guys.